Hello, everyone, and welcome to Spectrum Sessions, the podcast where we platform unfiltered autistic voices and celebrate our differences. I'm Heather from the National Autistic Society Scotland, and today we're here with Lorraine Gillies. Lorraine, it's great to have you here today. Could you please introduce yourself to anyone who doesn't know who you are?
Oh, hello. Yes, Lorraine Gillis. I do, suppose, multiple things. Recently diagnosed autistic ADHD woman. Sort of now working as a consultant with a wide portfolio of different things that we might touch on today.
Great, thank you. Can you tell us about one of your current special interests or hyperfixations, please?
Yeah, definitely. Horses and ponies. So, so it's
Cool.
lovely to be in this space, to talk sort of fairly freely about things that are a special interest. So but I think we might talk about it more. But I volunteer with Riding for the Disabled, and 2 days ago, so at the grand old age of 59, 2 days ago, I just went to view a horse, and I'm going to take a part share of a horse. So I'm so
Wow,
excited.
that's amazing.
Honestly, it's totally exciting. Yeah.
You were diagnosed autistic later in life after your daughter was diagnosed. Can you
Mhm,
talk a bit about your diagnosis journey and how it felt to finally discover that you were autistic?
mhm. Um, so I'm going to start with little Lorraine. Little Lorraine was always a bit odd. Found it difficult to make friends. Didn't have many friends. Had a sort of fairly typical undiagnosed autistic girl life trajectory. I wasn't massively functioning until I was in my 30s. Um, by that time, I'd accumulated a abusive relationship and a beautiful son. Um, and I went to college and all that sort of stuff happened. And I married again and had a daughter. Um, and about 5, 6 years ago, she was really struggling. She had done beautifully at school. She was glorious, golden, quirky, odd, strange little thing. But when she went to high school, she started to really struggle, and I didn't know what to do, and I didn't know what was going on. Um, and so I won't tell you the whole story. I'll give you the sort of, and this is relevant. I'm not going on a tangent.
Mhm.
Um, so we thought it might be depression, anxiety. We didn't know. And over a year of being battered about from CAMS to social work to GPs, um, she finally got in front of a psychiatrist who noticed that she was very thin. And I'm going to cut this quite short now because in a very short space of time, my daughter was hospitalised, very ill with anorexia. And we started on a family behavioural therapy programme that seemed to be working, but there was just something that we couldn't quite get to.
Mhm.
And one of our therapists said, "Do you think she might be autistic?" And I suppose that was a mic drop moment for me because my immediate reaction was, "No, she can't. Absolutely, she can't be because she's exactly the same as me." And
Yeah.
and she was exactly the same as me. And so sure enough, my daughter is autistic. She's since been diagnosed with ARFID, which, if you don't know, it is avoiding restricting food intake disorder. And
Mhm.
pennies started dropping for me all over the place. Um, this was in the first sort of part of COVID, that all of this was going on. And I spoke to my GP and went on a waiting list like everyone else, and finally was diagnosed. The surprise for me was I didn't consider ADHD.
Mhm.
Um, but my GP, sorry, the psychiatrist who diagnosed me, through the whole process that people would be familiar with, it takes a while. You've got to go through your whole history and and all of that. And he said, "Yep, yep, you are definitely autistic, but you are also ADHD." And I guess that was a bit of a surprise. But looking back, total sense,
Yes.
total sense. Um, so that was a couple of years ago, and um, I think for me, it felt initially quite liberating, quite freeing, because I finally understood um, all of the mysteries that
Mhm.
had been in my life up until that point. And for a while, it was fine, it was good, it was okay. And then I think a few things happened. Um, there's a lot of discussion about autism regression, and I definitely think that happened to me. It became much harder for me to mask. It became much harder for me to use the strategies that I developed. It just, my tolerance levels decreased. Um, I burned out, and at that point, I was the chief executive of a national Scottish charity that was going through a crisis, and it just became very difficult. And yeah, and I mean, I can pick up the rest of the stories. We go through the questions of, but now I'm doing fine.
Well, good. I'm glad you're doing fine, and it's a great story, and you told it well about how you got diagnosed and your daughter's story as well. So we'll go further into it as we go through the questions. But as for the next question, you've had an incredibly successful professional career, and you've held many senior roles in different organizations over the years. Did you find that you had to mask a lot in the workplace, and have you been able to unmask a bit since being diagnosed?
Wow. So I used to, before I knew any of this, I used to describe myself as a chameleon. And I can remember the moment that first sort of struck me. I was at, as a little girl, I was at private school, and I ended up, through parents divorcing and moving house, at a state school. And I remember very clearly, I went into that school and I talked differently, and I behaved differently, and I learned very quickly. I learned how to swear, and I learned the importance, if you live in West Lothian, to have a football team. So none of those things were important to me, and I thought that was the turning point for me. I thought that was the point at which I realised that to survive I had to pretend, but I didn't know then that I was autistic, and what I was doing was masking. And so from that point, I have pretended. I mean, you're right, I have moved into lots of fantastic jobs. If you have recruited me in the past, maybe don't listen to this, but I'm just really good at, yeah, I can do that. I can do that. Yeah, totally can do that. And I learn incredibly quickly. I'm the fastest learner, I think, on the planet. And so I have moved into jobs that I actually haven't the slightest clue how to do them. But it's about moving into a situation, understanding what's going on, sizing it up very quickly, and figuring out a way forward. And I am superb at that, and always have been. I've moved about a fair bit. I think that's because when I'm at my best, it's about going in and fixing a thing.
Mhm.
And sort of fixing something, doing something, coming out again. But yeah, so the answer to your question is, God Almighty, I've masked for 57 years, and now I'm really learning not to.
Well, that's good that you're learning not to, but it is difficult, isn't it, after you've masked for such a long time? So I imagine it'll take quite a while before you're fully able to be yourself, and you might not even get there. I mean, in a lot of situations in the workplace, it's not really safe to be
No,
your whole
it's not.
self a lot of the time now. So
That's a really good point. When I was first diagnosed, and I do shout a lot about this. I talk a lot on social media, I'm out being autistic, and I every time I do an interview, or I do something on telly, or I put something on LinkedIn, I usually get people contacting me, and sometimes they're saying to me, I'm autistic and I haven't told my workplace, and what do I do about it? And before, I would have said, always tell, always be open, always say. But I have had experience of where it hasn't been safe.
mhm.
Um, and, and and psychological safety is such an important thing. And I really feel for people who are in a workplace or who are in an environment and they don't feel safe enough to be who they are.
Yes.
And I'm not convinced I'm there yet either, because I don't really know who I am, but I'm learning.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. You recently co-founded the Wedge, which is a new resource which aims to support neurodivergent women in the workplace. How did this idea come about in the first place, and how was it informed with your own personal experiences of working as a neurodivergent woman?
Yeah. So see, this is my badge, the
Nice.
Wedge badge. Yeah, so in my last role, um, a crisis happened, and I was looking around for some support for neurodivergent women in the workplace. I don't quite know how to say this, but I'm going to say it, and I don't want to be hurting anyone, but I couldn't find anything that was for my level of working. I found lots of or some support for autistic women. I found some support for autistic women in the workplace, but I couldn't find anything that really was what I was looking for. And I think a lot of that is because a lot of autistic women just aren't in the workplace. And
Yeah.
those who are in the workplace are really struggling, and they're not managing to kind of, I don't know, to reach where I reached. And so I couldn't find any support, couldn't find any help. Did eventually find someone, but the other thing that occurred to me, or I realised, was that I wasn't the only one. So I
Yeah.
was putting things out on LinkedIn and Facebook and Twitter at the time, not on it anymore, saying things like, if I was to start something that helped autistic women in the workplace, would you be interested? And I got so many hell yeses. Um, so I shouted on some friends. Your director is one of them, Rob Holland,
Yeah.
from the National Autistic Society, and I shouted on Catherine McWilliams who's the Scotland director of the Institute of Directors in Scotland. I shouted on some other fantastic people, Claire Glenn from Glasgow Clyde College, Dr. Katrina Stewart from Scottish Police Authority, a whole bunch of people that I had met in my journey that had clicked, that connected, that also wanted to make a difference for autistic women. Danny and Rachel and Aileen, I feel like I should name you all, but you'll understand if I don't, because I don't always remember. So we had an initial meeting last June along the lines of what we're going to do here, what we're going to do, because I am in tears sometimes, people phoning me or texting me saying that their life is just so hard, trying to maintain, a working life and trying to support their family or trying to get an assessment or trying to, be visible or, all those things. And so we decided that we were going to do a thing. I'm not still not 100% sure what the thing is yet. But my husband, who is my strong supporter, created us a website. So www.thewedge, all lowercase, .scot. Have a look at it. So there's a website. We held a co-produced session last month. We had about 35 women joining us, and we were just talking about, what are the pressures on us, what things might help, what things might make a difference, how can we do this, what do we want to create. So the founders, so I'm not the only founder, the other people I mentioned, we're all meeting very soon to think about what will that look like? What does help look like for autistic women in the workplace? Does it look like regular meetings? Does it look like resources? Does it look like using the website to signpost people? What does it look like? The things that made such a difference for me were talking to other autistic women and to understand that I wasn't on my own. And so we said some things are a given, that we want to provide some solidarity to other women who are like me, and we also want safe workplaces for autistic women, neurodivergent women. I talk about autistic women, I mean neuro-minority women. I mean
Yeah.
people with ADHD, with dyslexia, with dyspraxia, all of that. So it's really early days yet for it. There's no resource. We don't have any money. We call ourselves a collective or a collaboration. We don't know whether it might become a company. We don't know whether it become a charity. We don't know. So if you're watching this and you've got some ideas, or you want to help, or you think you want to be involved, definitely give me a shout.
It sounds great. It sounds like a great resource. It's the kind of thing I'd love to be involved in, and I'm sure that a lot of other autistic women will be making good use of it once we figure out what exactly it's going to be.
What is it?
So, yeah. So you've already maybe mentioned this or answered this question a bit, but what are your goals for the wedge?
It needs to be helpful to neuro minority women in the workplace. It needs to, in whatever way that needs to be. I'm very conscious that there's lots of support out there for workplaces who want to be more neuro aware. I'm a board member of the Donaldson's Trust, it's the National Centre for Neurodiversity, and we're putting on some sessions next week for Neurodiversity Celebration Week, or whatever it's called. I always get these names wrong. And I know that there's quite a lot of stuff happening there. I've spoken at conferences before about being a neurodivergent friendly workplace. But being a neurodivergent friendly workplace isn't enough for women who are in it, struggling, trying to cope, trying to manage all these different things. I want it to be created by women, for women. I'm very happy to talk to anyone about why women. But yeah, that's my hopes for the wedge.
Great. Why do you think that it is so important to ensure that autistic women are better supported in the workplace?
So I think the world is just learning about neurodiversity in women. Indeed, when my daughter was diagnosed, or it was even suggested to me, and my immediate thought was, no, that's not possible. My nephew's autistic. I know what autistic looks like. We don't know enough about neuro-minority women. We don't know enough about neuro-minority women in the workplace. We don't know enough about how our minds work. We don't know enough about how we cope with information. We are, by definition, women are not offered the same opportunities as men. My work has covered things like gender-based violence and all of that sort of stuff, and I'm just acutely aware of how women are very often left behind and are bearing the brunt of it all. So this is specifically for women because we are very often the caregivers. We're the ones who are trying to juggle the workplace and the caregiving and the practical stuff. And I don't think that even I don't understand how my mind works. So yeah, so that's why women.
And can you provide some examples of adjustments that autistic people who are listening to this could ask for in their own workplaces? I know that when I was diagnosed and I was looking for ways I could ask for adjustments, I definitely looked online for resources because it's hard to come up with things on your own and know what's reasonable to be asking. So
it is hard, and if you're like me, I have a fairly hefty processing delay, but I didn't realise it. And I remember looking at, a year and a half ago, looking at access to work and thinking, there's absolutely nothing here that would make a difference to me. But now that I have spent, had some real time to think about that, of course there are things that would make a difference to me. But if your brain works like mine and information coming in does take a little bit of time to digest and work through, I would say that my immediate thought was, no, nothing's going to make any difference. Nothing's going to help. It won't matter. But extra time to do things, interpretation. I realised that I process multiple information much better than single sources. So if someone gives me a piece of text, I will read it, or I'll probably skim it. If I've got a picture to go with that bit of text, then that's better. If someone talks to me at the same time as giving me the text and the picture, then even better. If I can watch a film, then even better. So, and that's just something that I've understood about myself, that that is how my information is processed, through multiple different entry points and multiple different medias. And I was doing that. So when I became a chief executive and I'm broadly in charge of what information came to me, I would be much more comfortable with saying, no, can you give me something to illustrate that, or can you give me a case study, or can you give me, any pictures of that? and that was before I was realised I was autistic. I was trying to figure it out by myself. So adaptions. So I spend a lot of time thinking about the difference between equality and equity. And in most workplaces, if you're lucky, there'll be a quality policy, procedures. It'll be about making sure that everybody gets equal access to stuff, and that's all lovely. When your baseline is not at the same place as everybody else, though, equality is not that good for you. What you need is equity. So when you are starting from a place that if everyone's given the same information in the same form, then your processing speed is different. You're going to process that differently. Actual equity would be for you to get that information earlier, or for you to get that information accompanied by additional information that will help you understand that, or for you to have that information interpreted for you in a way that makes more sense. So that's just, I suppose, one example. I was have been quite burnt out. I had been burnt out in a job because I was working night and day, trying to solve a crisis, and I ended up really damaging myself. I was really not very well, and so this may or may not have happened to me. But imagine you're negotiating what that should look like, and you're sort of saying, "So I don't want to take this off as sick time." Do you know? I really would, don't want to do that. Can we just disregard that? And you can't do that when you've got a equality-based sickness policy. But if you accept that someone's baseline is way further back than everybody else's, then you can think about that. It's very similar to what we did in COVID.
Yeah.
People who were off sick with COVID, their sicknesses were disregarded because people have discretion. So I think that very often people who are disabled or are in workplaces that are likely to need more time off because they have a disability or an illness or a condition, and then I think sickness policies are very unequal. So good luck to you arguing that in your workplace. So maybe I'm going into the territory of accommodations that are quite difficult, but those are the things that I think we need to really think about if we are creating equitable workplaces, and if you're asking for accommodations that make things equitable for you.
Yeah.
I think very strongly that workplaces, I mean, you will know the figure for autistic people in work fluctuate. I mean, it's between what, 18 and 25%, something like that. That's awful. That's terrible. You're not telling me that 75% of autistic people can't work. No. But workplaces with some adjustments and some changes and can be much better places for people to work. I fully accept that some people can't work, and that's completely fine. But there are things that you can do.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting you talking about changing the sort of sickness and sick leave. I've not really heard about that being an adjustment, but I think it makes so much sense. I think it is a harder thing for workplaces to put in place, and I've not really heard of many workplaces doing that for autistic people, giving them more time off if they need it and stuff. But yeah, that would be a really good adjustment.
And I'm not saying blanketly do that. What I'm saying is if you've got someone who's been sick quite a lot, think about it. Why is that happening? Is it because your workplace is causing burnout? Is it because the rules that you have? Just think about that. So for me, it's about trying to understand before making decisions.
Yeah, and it's different for every autistic person. We're all so different. So I think it's very much depends on what the autistic person wants themselves. You are described as a pioneer for flexible working, and you have implemented a 4-day work week. Can you talk a bit more about the importance of flexible working for autistic people?
Oh man, I used to work in a public body. And the culture in that public body was you would be at your desk early doors and you would be there till later on in that, late on at night. And oh my goodness, how much did I struggle with that? I really struggled with that. And and I work really quickly as well. I can get a 5-day week done in 3 days. Just me. Um, and I also struggle with rules that don't make sense. Quite like rules, but I don't like rules that don't make sense. And so when I moved to the organisation I worked in before, it just it made it made sense to be more flexible. The organisation worked all across Scotland. It didn't make sense to have set sort of times for clocking on, clocking off. It didn't make sense to sign in, sign out. It didn't make sense to keep timesheets because those timesheets would have to be dealt with. Somebody's administrative time would have to be taken up by that.
Yeah.
And before I knew I was autistic, I wanted very much to take away some of those processes. For example, there was on the wall there was a fingerprint activated time recording thing where if you left office you put your fingerprint in and it would clock you out and it would clock you back in and all of that. And I didn't, that just raised hackles for me, so I unplugged it. And then my staff team and I sat and thought about how do we want to work together, what things are important. And it was things like, having the flexibility to take your dog out, having the flexibility to have a doctor's appointment and not have to take a whole half day for it. Very often that's a thing in workplaces. If you have a doctor's appointment, you've got to take a whole half day. Why would you want to take a whole half day? Why can't you just take an hour back at your work? And so I created a workplace that didn't have timesheets, that didn't expect people to work from 9 to 5, that valued working from home, and all of that stuff. And I didn't know I was creating a neurodivergent friendly workplace. I just thought I was creating a trauma practicing workplace. And a lot of the work that I've been involved in is about understanding trauma and that people don't come into their work with nothing in their bag. You bring things with you, and to have the best out of your workforce, it's probably best to understand what's going on and try and support people. But surely they're your number one asset, are they not? So all of that happened, and and the natural progression was a 4-day week, and again, all of the workforce together talked about it. We researched it. We talked to other organisations that had done a 4-day week. There's lots of different ways of doing it. You can do it through rota, and you can do it with everyone taking the same day off. You can do it, compressed hours. Everybody working still the same amount of hours, but in less days. Lots of different ways you can do it. We decided as a staff team and with board of directors' approval that we would just not work on a Friday. That all the work would get done Monday to Friday. And it was up to you. You were an adult. You were recruited based on your skill set and your values. You had a job to do. If you weren't doing it, you were going to let down the rest of your staff team, and everybody knew that. And that's what we did. And it piloted for 6 months. At the same time, we did some baseline evaluations, like how stressed are you at work, how much work-life balance do you have? What would you do with your day off that you had it? Would you contribute to your community? Would you do some volunteering? So we did all of that, monitored it the whole way through. And turns out it was a thing. It was a good thing. People were much happier in their workplace. Work-life balance was better. For me, it wasn't 4-day working. It was 3-day not working. Because I think when people are rested, when people have more time, they're in their workplace and they're much more able to focus and do things. And the organisation that did that is still a 4-day a week employer. I don't think they'll go back, but I'm not there anymore, so I don't know. It certainly worked for us.
That's great. And it does make a lot of sense, especially if you think about how neurodivergent people, our focus can be different. We can hyper focus on something for 3 hours and get enough work done that would take someone else
Totally.
2 days. And so I think And, you know, 9 to 5 doesn't work for everyone, certainly not.
Not everyone in that workplace was neurodivergent, and they don't
Mhm.
have to be. You know,
Yeah.
there was no increased volume. There was no expectation. We didn't talk about productivity and stuff like that. You know, that just it's not what we did. But what we did also do is we surveyed round all of our stakeholders and said, we've been doing this 4-day week for a while now. Have you noticed any difference? And nobody had noticed a negative difference. In fact, a couple of people came back and said, yeah, you're really on it. You know, so
That's great.
so it's
Um,
possible to do in a small workplace or a big workplace. It just requires will, I think.
you're also someone who promotes trauma-informed practicing workplaces. Can you tell us a bit more about what that means?
It just means what we're talking about. It just means understanding that everyone in your workplace comes to work with stuff. Everyone's got stuff in their backpack. And I think the expectation that you can just park that and just be super focused on your work is not always realistic. And so really just for me, it's important to know who your workforce is as much as you possibly can. If you're a leader, it doesn't matter what level in your workplace you're working in. People first, people before processes. And for me, that was what a trauma practicing workforce was about. I remember at the start of this particular credit crisis, let's call it, money crunch. My board of directors, who were really on board, we gave everyone a cost of living payment for nothing, because
Mhm.
people are worried. When people are worried about how you're going to pay your bills, what's happening with your childcare, do you know what? People are worried because their mum's got dementia and you don't know what sort of home to get for her. You're not truly at your work. You're not in your workplace.
Mhm.
And so, of course, you can go down the punitive route if you want to, but I kind of opted not to do that. Why would you do that?
Yeah.
So that's what I consider a trauma practicing workplace to be.
Sounds good. Definitely people-centered workplaces. That sounds like a really good idea. Can you talk a bit more about what it's like to be an autistic parent of an autistic daughter?
Oh, I mean, she's my buddy. You know, she's now 21. She doesn't mind me talking about her. She's called Tiger. She's the most glorious, the most awesome thing on the planet. Um, I have another son and a grandson who are also awesome. um, but there were so many similarities between Tiger and I growing up, and when she was a teen, we clashed terribly, terribly, terribly. And when she was going through the beginning of the treatment for her eating disorder, it was hideous. You know, it was really, really difficult.
Yeah.
But now I can't say that I could. I mean, we're different. You know, we're different, but we're the same.
Mhm.
We have different traits. I wanted to be diagnosed mostly so that I could show my daughter that it's okay. You know, that you can be autistic and you can be ADHD and you can function.
That's
I just
great.
thought that was the most important thing I could do.
What do you think needs to change in Scotland to improve the lives of autistic young people?
Oh, early diagnosis, 100%. When my baby was at primary school, the signs were there. I mean, God almighty. It was obvious, obvious to anybody with half a day's training in autistic girls. But of course, that wasn't a thing then. My baby was told off for twitching, for she just she would be trying to be on stage because she loved acting and she'd be getting told to keep her face straight and stuff.
Yeah.
Early diagnosis is, I think, the most important thing. I think every school, every nursery, every primary school needs to understand the difference between autism in boys and girls, because it is different. It's wildly different. And then that knowledge needs to be filtered right up and down the system. Colleges need to understand how autism in girls affects learning. I am acutely aware, autism is a social and communication disability, ultimately. And if you have challenges around your kind of social life that you're not quite grasping and you don't quite understand, your brain is full of that.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult to do your academic stuff, while your brain is full of this. And I think it's vitally important that learning understands that people's learning will be affected by their communication and by their understanding of things and by their the kind of particular things that are important. Sense of social justice. I have such a huge sense of social justice. It's phenomenal. But sometimes that's inexplicable to people. And it's not until now that I kind of realise that I would say I can't do that. I cannot literally go in there because of this. People look at me as if I'm mad. Why can't you? Because they do this. I can't go in there because of this.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's understood that it's not a case of won't, it's a case of can't.
I agree with you 100% on the early diagnosis and the school stuff. I'm a wee bit older than your daughter. I'm 25, but when I was in school, it was so obvious. It really was, and it wasn't picked up either. But I'm just hoping that schools are getting better with that sort of thing now that autism is becoming more of, people are talking about it a bit more now. So I'm hoping that things are getting better.
I hope so. And for the people who say, so a few things while I'm on a rant, while I've got this.
Yes.
Well, there weren't autistic people when I was at school. They were maybe not at school, or they were
Yes.
maybe in the corner, or they were maybe harming themselves, or they were maybe in a secure unit. They were there. They were there. You just didn't know that. And you don't look autistic all the time.
Yes.
So what does autistic look like then? So there are some commonly held beliefs about autism that I think we need to be trying very hard just to help people understand the reality of.
Yeah, definitely. I would agree with that. If you could give your younger self some advice, what would it be?
It'll be all right.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be okay. You're not wrong or broken. You're not difficult, Lorraine, and you're not challenging.
You volunteer for Riding for the Disabled, an organisation that gives people with disabilities the opportunity to ride a horse. I think the relationship that autistic people can have with animals is just wonderful. I myself have 3 cats and a dog, and I've not really had the opportunity to talk about animals much on the podcast yet, so it's great to have that opportunity now. Could you
Let's do
talk a
it.
bit about how animals and pets can make a real difference to the lives of neurodivergent and disabled people?
Huge. The sensory feeling of my nephew. He's the most outstanding boy. He's 18. He has cats, and the joy he gets from touching his cats. And Nathan now volunteers with Riding for the Disabled with me, and Nathan has various challenges, but when he's at RDA, I can't describe. He catches ponies, he tacks them up, he rides. He things that, and this is the beauty of animals for autistic young people. They I don't know. There's no judgment. There's no sides. This feels like a lovely thing, and it is a lovely thing. And I don't know, my daughter has a menagerie of pets, and she gets so much joy out of that. We are constantly seeking some of us are constantly seeking sensation. And when we find the sensation that works for us, then we go back to that time and time again, and that's a good thing. That's a good thing. Shout out to Riding for the Disabled. Awesome organisation. We're all volunteers. We all do it for no money. A lot of work involved, but fantastic organisation. And horses, just you can see people, lots of autistic riders. You can see that whole empathy thing, the caring, the sense of, I don't know, beings on this planet together, just really working for people. What are
Yeah.
your animals' names?
I've got a border collie named Maple,
Uh-huh.
and I've got 3 cats. I've got Luca, Leo, and I've got a new one called Yoshi. Little kitten.
I also have a Jack Russell Terrier called Sally, who's asleep on the bed behind me.
Aw. Yeah, I would agree. I think that pets are just such a wonderful thing for autistic people. It's not only just the sensory aspect, but it's
Yeah.
also you can be with, another being and there's no pressure to be like social
Yes.
with them or chat to them. You can just be quiet and in your own
Mhm.
space and they'll just sit with you and it's such a lovely connection you can build with them.
Totally agree.
What are your goals for the future?
Uh, uh, I'm quite happy just now. I'm doing bits and bobs of work that I really enjoy. I've got my volunteering, which I love. I travel a lot. I love to travel. I don't have. My last role was chief executive of a National Scottish Charity. I have no inkling to do that again. Charity leaders in Scotland are under immense pressure. It's a difficult environment to be in, and I'm not interested in going back there. I would like to. I want the Wedge to grow. I remember talking to Rob, your director, about in my career at the age of 59, just wanting to do more for my tribe.
Yeah,
So I want that. That is my ambition.
that sounds great. What are some of the misconceptions about autism that you wish people understood?
Yeah, so we talked about them a little bit. You don't look
Yeah,
autistic. And autism is not always linked to a learning disability. That's the thing that I encounter quite a lot. It's not the same, and autism in boys and girls is completely different. I suppose those are the typical ones. Those are the ones that, and I think for me, because I don't look autistic, and I'm very good at masking, or have been very good at masking. But that doesn't mean I'm not going home at the end of the day and drinking wine and banging my head.
yes.
um, so don't assume that somebody's got it nailed, because very often we haven't got it nailed. I'm very conscious. I'm on the board of Community Justice Scotland at the minute, and I'm very conscious about the number of neuro minority people in the justice system that shouldn't be there. And I'm also involved in a local charity called The Scheme. It's a recovery charity because neurodivergence and addictions, lots of comorbidities around that, so yeah. So I suppose don't make assumptions, learn as much as you can, you know, is what I would say.
Yeah, I would agree. The whole thing about you don't look autistic or whatever. I mean, you could see someone and they're just highly masking in an environment and they might appear totally like everyone else and not struggling at all. And then they could go home and then for 2 days they're just in their bed trying to
They're in
recover
the bed.
from the social exertion. Do you know what I mean? And you can't see that. So,
You can't see it.
yeah, people need to
And
understand that.
we don't say it.
Mhm.
We
Yeah.
don't say it. So, and I'm better now at saying, I've been really social this weekend, so I can't do anything. I have no expectations of me, because it feels weird to say that, but that's the reality of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Makes sense. What is a fact that people would be surprised to know about you?
God, I don't think. I think there's nothing about me that people don't know. Um, I think I'm just I can't shut up. Well, that's not surprising, but I can't. There is nothing private and confidential about Lorraine Gillis. So, no, nothing.
All right. Well, it's good to be open anyway. Um, so we've got the final question now is what does being autistic mean to you?
It's who I am now. It was always who I was, but I didn't know that. But it's who I am now, and that's fine.
Great. That's a great way to put it.
Mm.
But that's all my questions for today, Lorraine. It's been so great to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.